Welcome back to Shorter Recaps. In today's video, we will be recapping a movie titled The Book Thief, which is released in 2013. Before we begin, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this, and tell us what movies to recap in the comments. The movie opens with a narration about death and how it will come to everyone. The scene then moves to a snowy landscape where a train is running down a hill. In the back seat sits a woman with her two children, Liesel Meminger and her brother, Werner, who sits on his mother's lap. During the ride, Liesel notices something wrong with Werner, as his nose is bleeding. It turns out that he passed away, and they have to bury him by the train tracks. After the burial, a book falls out from a grave digger's coat, and Liesel takes it with her. Afterwards, Liesel is in a car with two staff from the adoption agency. One of them says that her mother would have kept her if she could, implying that their family is in a bad situation. They arrive at Heaven Street, where Liesel's new foster parents live. She stays in the car as the staff tells the couple that Werner died on the way. The foster mother, Rosa Huberman, seems upset as they were promised to be paid twice for taking care of two children, and makes a snide remark about communists being dumb and dirty. Rosa comes to the car and tells Liesel to come out, but she refuses. As Rosa storms away, the foster father, Hans Huberman, comes over to the car and treats her gently, calling her Your Majesty, and urges her to go out. She shyly comes out of the car with him. Rosa turns around and sees a few boys playing football on the road. She grumbles and calls them naughty. One of them, Rudi Steiner, stares at Liesel, who is standing beside Hans. Hans walks Liesel under his umbrella and introduces her to her new home. He opens the door for her, then Liesel walks and observes her new house. Rosa tries to give her candy, then asks Liesel to say thank you, but she doesn't respond. Rosa takes the candy away and chides that Liesel is a mute. After facing Rosa's anger, Liesel goes upstairs to her room with Hans. He puts Liesel's belongings on the other bed and plays a magic trick with candy for her. After the trick, he gives her the candy, putting a little smile on her face. Then, Rosa calls him downstairs, which then leaves Liesel alone in her room. The next scene shows Heaven Street's atmosphere at night. Liesel stares at the bed beside hers. She misses her brother, so she holds the book from his funeral to accompany her. The following morning, Liesel goes downstairs and finds Hans playing the accordion. Liesel walks towards the dining table as Rosa asks him to stop playing the accordion peevishly. Liesel and Hans are sitting at the table eating breakfast. Rosa is standing next to Liesel and tells her to call her mama, and to call Hans papa. After that, someone is knocking on the door. It is Rudi Steiner. He says that his mother asked him to take Liesel to school with him. Rosa, who is annoyed, answers the door and asks Rudi if he's good enough for her daughter. Then, she tells Liesel to finish her breakfast and change her clothes to go to school with Rudi. On the way to school, Rudi admits that his mother never asked him to pick her up, as he just wants to do it himself. They arrive at school. There's a portrait of Hitler on the wall, signing that the movie is set in times of Nazi Germany. Liesel is in the same class as Rudi, and the teacher tells her to write her name on the board. It seems that she cannot write or read, so during recess, she gets bullied by the other students who call her a dumbhead. A boy is teasing her, but Liesel won't let them bully her anymore, so she fights him until he's bleeding. Then she gets separated by her teacher. After school, while walking down the hall, Rudi is saying to Liesel that he is amazed by her bravery. On the way home, Liesel tells Rudi that he can be a great footballer, yet Rudi denies it. Liesel then says that she won't stay for long there, as she is running away from something and needs to find her real mother again. It seems like Rudi is falling in love with her, as he challenges her to a race. If he wins, he will get a kiss from Liesel, but if he loses, he won't kiss her forever. Liesel cheats by running first, and the kids race in joy until they slide off the street into a pile of snow. That night, Hans comes to check on Liesel and sees that she's holding the book. He sees it and questions that it belongs to her. He asks if she can read it, and she says no, so he encourages her to read the book together. It is apparently a grave digger's guidebook. The scene moves on to Liesel happily singing a patriotic song with her school's choir. On the other hand, tragedy strikes in the streets of Germany as Nazi soldiers raid stores and homes and beats up non-Germanic people. That is also when a young man named Max Vandenberg has to leave her mother alone to face the Nazis, as he escapes to find someone. It makes him feel very heartbroken. Sometime later at the Hubermans' home, Hans accompanies Liesel to read, which is her first book that managed to complete. Then Hans closely walks to Liesel, opening the book she holds and finds a picture of her brother, Warren. He then brings her to the basement and shows her a wall painted with words and tells her it's her dictionary to write every word that she has learned. Liesel is very happy and hugs Hans as she says thank you. Meanwhile, Rudy, who is covered in black paint, is practicing running on a track and imagines that he's Jesse Owens, the fastest human on Earth. He gets caught by the man who owns the sports club and is brought back home. His father, Alex Steiner, bathes him and says that he shouldn't want to be like Jesse Owens, who is black. Later, in April of 1939, Liesel is writing a letter for her mother while Hans and Rosa are busy with their activities. Rosa is wary as she cannot find their flag for Hitler's birthday celebration. Hans goes to the basement and finds Liesel writing the letter. The family gets ready for the celebration in town. People are gathered to listen to a speech about the Nazis' enemies, and the soldiers burn a pile of books that the Nazis deemed as wrong or dirty. While the others happily sing, Liesel, who loves to read, is horrified by the spectacle. After the ceremony is done, she steals a book from the pile. Hans sees it and tells her to hide it in the basement. She confronts him about her mother never coming back because she's a communist who is hunted by the Nazis, and says that she hates Hitler, but Hans tells her not to say it aloud. Liesel and Hans are in the basement reading the book. Then, there's a loud knocking on the front door and they find that it is Max Vandenberg. He collapses upon entering the house, and they bring him upstairs to the bed next to Liesel's. Hans explains to her that Max is the son of someone who died to save Hans' life in the previous war, and she shouldn't tell anyone about Max. Rosa is worried about the situation, but Hans reminds her that Max's father gave him all he has now. Back in their room, Liesel tries to read Max's book but gets caught as he says she's a curious girl. She asks him if he's hiding from Hitler because he's a communist, but he says it's because he's Jewish. On the next day, Rosa gives Liesel a task. She should deliver a basket of laundry to Governor Hermann's house. Liesel goes to the mansion with Rudy, who admires Hermann. There, she meets Hermann's wife, who notices that Liesel likes books. She invites Liesel to their library to read books and introduces herself as Ilse. Liesel has to come back home, but Ilse says she's welcome to read there anytime. On the street, children are cheering about going to war with England. The narrator, who is the personification of death, says that war only brings more people to him. Liesel goes to Hermann's house to deliver their laundry again. She enjoys reading there, memorizing all the words she found and writing them on the basement wall. Unfortunately, Max has to be moved to the basement as Rosa is afraid that people will notice him, and it will allow Max to move around. There, he asks where Liesel learns all the words on the wall and asks her to describe the day outside using her own words. Another day of laundry delivery finds Liesel reading another book in Hermann's library. Unfortunately, Hermann finds out about it and forbids Liesel to come there again and stops using Rosa's laundry service. Rosa is upset and worried as they can barely afford to eat. Then, the war has finally impacted the citizens, and Rudy's father is called to join the army. It's Christmas Eve. Liesel is excited to bring a newspaper for Max. He reads the news update about the war and says that the world has gone mad. To cheer him up, Liesel has an idea to bring snow from outside to the basement and play snowball fight with the whole family, even Rosa. Afterwards, Max gives Liesel his book that he has painted white on every page, telling her to write. The next day, Max is shivering and gets sick as there is melted snow all around him. Liesel feels bad as she thinks it's her fault that he is sick. Feeling guilty, Liesel reads the unconscious Max books that she steals from Hermann's library. One day, Rudy catches Liesel in the act. He confronts her about Max's gift, so Liesel confesses that they're hiding a man in her house. Rudy says he won't tell anyone, but a bully comes and asks them what they're hiding. He and Rudy fight until the book falls down the river, but Rudy manages to catch it for Liesel. Sometime after, there are Nazi soldiers coming to check people's basements, so Liesel runs home and informs her parents. Thankfully, they manage to hide Max in time under a Nazi flag. As they're in a war, there have been a lot of air raids. Liesel and her parents go to the underground bunker in town with the other citizens. Hans helps the others distract their fear by playing his accordion. Meanwhile, Max gets a chance to enjoy the outside world as everyone is in the bunker. One day, the Nazis are taking a man in town who they found to be Jewish. Hans decides to help him by saying that he's German, and they've known him since they were kids. But the soldiers don't care, instead taking note of Hans' name. At home, Hans feels guilty for trying to save the guy as they're now under surveillance. After hearing it, Max decides to leave the house for the family's safety, despite the family's sadness to see him go. Tomorrow following, Hans gets a letter that says he must join the military. It's a tough moment for the family, especially Rosa. She cries while holding his accordion, worried about Hans' safety. Liesel and Rudy go to a lake in the summer, where they both express their hate for Hitler. In November 1942, the airstrikes are getting worse. People in the bunker are anxious and afraid. Reminded of her father playing the accordion, Liesel tells a story for the people so they are distracted from the bombings. Rosa is very proud of her. They get out of the bunker once the strike is done, and Liesel thinks that he sees Max, but she can't find him as she begins to forget his face. Liesel is chatting with Rudy outside their homes when a car drops off Hans on Heaven Street. Liesel is very excited to see him. She quickly runs and hugs him, and the family has a warm dinner where Hans plays the accordion again. Liesel mentions that he always thinks of Max, and so does Hans. He doesn't understand why Max and all of them have to experience the cruelty of war and fascism, but Liesel says that they're all just trying to be human. Finding inspiration, Liesel begins to write in Max's book. She tells her life story with her own words, even until she falls asleep writing in the basement. That night, a surprise airstrike falls on Heaven Street. Death, the narrator, explains how Rosa, Hans, Rudy's brothers and mother die in their sleep. In the morning, the soldiers find Liesel alive because she was sleeping in the basement. She sees her parents who are dead, and Rudy who is barely alive. He tries to tell her something but unfortunately dies in her arms. Liesel passes out in grief, and wakes up to see Ilse there and hugs her. 2 years later, the United States Army occupies Germany, and the war is over. Liesel is now working for Rudy's father's shop. A young man enters the store. It's Max, and Liesel runs to hug him. The movie closes with Death narrating that life is temporary, but sometimes people like Liesel, who grew to live until 90 years old, haunts him on how it is to be alive. That is all for today's recap. Thanks for watching, and see you on our next video.